Imagine you're the Soviet Union during the Cold War. You have thousands of nuclear weapons, a fleet of missile submarines, and one of the world's most secret military bases. Every order, every submarine movement, every discussion about nuclear missiles travels through a communication system that you believe is impossible to spy on. No satellites, no radio signals, no wireless transmissions, just a heavily protected cable lying silently beneath the freezing waters of the Sea of Okhotsk. A cable the Soviets believed no enemy could ever reach. But for nearly 10 years, the CIA and the U.S. Navy secretly listened to almost every conversation. Without cutting the cable, without triggering an alarm, without the Soviets ever realizing, it became one of the greatest intelligence operations in history, until one desperate American sold the entire mission for just $35,000. The year was 1971. The Cold War had reached one of its most dangerous periods. The United States and the Soviet Union weren't fighting each other directly, but they were preparing for the possibility that one day they might. Both nations possessed enough nuclear weapons to destroy civilization several times over. Knowing what your enemy was planning wasn't just valuable. It could mean the difference between survival and nuclear catastrophe. American spy satellites constantly searched Soviet territory. Reconnaissance aircraft flew dangerous missions. Submarines silently patrolled beneath the oceans. Every piece of intelligence mattered. Then, American analysts made an incredible discovery. On Russia's remote Pacific coast, near the city of Petropavlovsk, the Soviets had constructed a massive submarine base. This wasn't an ordinary naval harbor. It housed nuclear-powered submarines carrying ballistic missiles capable of striking the United States. The CIA desperately wanted to know what was happening inside. But there was one major problem. The base was almost completely sealed off from foreign surveillance. Captain James Bradley of the U.S. Navy began studying maps of the region. He knew something important. Military commanders had to communicate somehow. Radio transmissions could be intercepted. Satellite communications barely existed. The safest option would be underwater telephone cables. Bradley believed the Soviet Navy was connecting its submarine base to military headquarters using cables laid across the floor of the Sea of Okhotsk. Finding that cable would be almost impossible. The Sea of Okhotsk wasn't ordinary water. The Soviets considered it their private lake. It was surrounded on three sides by Soviet territory, protected by naval patrols, aircraft, radar stations, and submarine hunters. If an American submarine was discovered there, it could trigger an international crisis. But the mission was approved anyway, because the potential reward was simply too valuable. The submarine chosen for the mission wasn't the newest or the fastest. It was USS Halibut, originally built as a missile submarine. It had later been transformed into one of America's most advanced intelligence vessels. Its crew carried sophisticated sonar equipment, underwater cameras, special diving gear, and one incredibly unusual objective: find a telephone cable on the bottom of one of the world's most heavily guarded seas. The journey itself was dangerous. The submarine slipped quietly through Soviet-controlled waters, avoiding patrol ships and underwater detection systems. Hours became days, days became weeks. The crew searched the seabed meter by meter. Then, they noticed something unexpected. Along the Soviet coastline, warning signs instructed fishing boats not to drop anchors. Those signs weren't protecting sea life, they were protecting something beneath the water. The cable. The clues had been there the entire time. Finding the cable was only half the mission. Now came the impossible part. How do you tap into a military communication cable without anyone noticing? Cutting the cable would immediately alert Soviet engineers. Instead, American engineers created an astonishing piece of technology, a massive induction wiretap. Rather than slicing into the cable, the device simply wrapped around it. As electrical signals passed through the Soviet communication line, the wiretap silently captured them using electromagnetic induction. No interruption, no damaged cable, no warning signal. Divers carefully installed the device deep beneath the freezing water. When the mission was complete, USS Halibut disappeared into the darkness. The Soviets never knew anyone had been there, and the conversations began flowing. straight into American hands. What happened next exceeded even the CIA's expectations. About once every month, another American submarine quietly returned to the Sea of Okhotsk. Its mission wasn't to install another device. It was simply to collect the recorded tapes. The induction wiretap stored thousands of hours of Soviet communications before its recordings were swapped for fresh ones. Each recovery mission carried enormous risk. One mistake, one unexpected Soviet patrol, or one malfunction could expose one of America's most valuable intelligence operations. But month after month, year after year, the missions succeeded. Back in the United States, teams of intelligence analysts and Russian linguists worked around the clock translating every conversation. The information was extraordinary. They learned where Soviet ballistic missile submarines were deployed. They tracked naval exercises before they happened. They gained insight into maintenance schedules, command procedures, and operational readiness. Perhaps most importantly, the recordings gave American military planners a far clearer understanding of the Soviet Union's nuclear capabilities. Instead of guessing what Moscow might do, they could often hear the discussions themselves. For nearly a decade, Operation Ivy Bells became one of the greatest intelligence successes of the Cold War. But America's biggest threat wasn't the Soviet Navy. It came from one of its own citizens. His name was Ronald Pelton. He wasn't a CIA field agent. He wasn't a submarine commander. He was a former National Security Agency analyst. Pelton was highly intelligent and fluent in Russian. Because of his language skills, he had helped translate many of the recordings collected from Operation Ivy Bells. That meant he understood exactly how valuable the operation was. But after leaving the NSA, his life began to fall apart. He was drowning in debt, financially desperate, unable to keep up with his bills. In January 1980, Pelton made a decision that would destroy one of America's greatest intelligence victories. He walked into the Soviet embassy in Washington, D.C., and offered to sell classified information. The Soviets accepted. For approximately $35,000, Pelton revealed the existence of Operation Ivy Bells, including the exact location of the underwater wiretap. Years of secrecy, sold for less than the price of a modest family car. In 1981, American satellites noticed something unusual. Several Soviet naval vessels had gathered over the exact location of the underwater cable. Soon afterward, an American submarine returned for its routine tape collection. But something was wrong. The wiretap was gone. The Soviets had recovered it. The operation was over. One of the most successful espionage missions in American history had ended, not because the technology failed, not because a submarine had been detected, but because someone on the inside had betrayed it. For several years, American investigators had no idea who had leaked the operation. Then, in 1985, an unexpected opportunity appeared. A senior KGB officer named Vitaly Yurchenko defected to the West. During CIA debriefings, Yurchenko revealed that the Soviet Union had received information from an American source inside the intelligence community. He didn't know the man's name, but he remembered several details. The spy had been a former NSA employee. He had translated Russian material, and he had distinctive red hair. That was enough. The FBI combined Yurchenko's information with records of suspicious phone calls made to the Soviet embassy years earlier. One name fit perfectly: Ronald Pelton. The investigation closed in, and in 1985, he was arrested. At trial, Ronald Pelton was convicted of espionage and sentenced to prison. He would spend roughly 30 years behind bars before his release in 2015. As for Operation Ivy Bells, it remains one of the boldest intelligence operations ever attempted. An American submarine entered what the Soviet Union believed were completely secure waters, found a hidden communication cable, attached a recording device without cutting it, and listened to secret military conversations for nearly a decade. It proved a lesson that intelligence agencies still remember today. The strongest encryption, the most advanced technology, and the most heavily guarded military installations can all be defeated, sometimes not by superior weapons, but by superior ideas. And sometimes they're defeated by something far simpler. One person willing to sell a nation's greatest secret for money.